How's that?
Higher pitch than it used to be.
Welcome to the council work session, February 13th council work session. And thank you, Greg. Good to see you. And we're going to swap the order a little bit because we're a little concerned about time. So we will put the committee reports and items, special items at the end of the meeting, assuming we have time. If we run out of time, we'll bump it to Wednesday. But Betty, we have it in mind. And so we'll begin with the rest stop conversation. Turn it over to you, City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor, and I'll give it to Mia and Reagan to take us through this conversation.
Hi, all. We have a very brief presentation for you today, and we'll move through this information quickly because we know that you want to have ample time for conversation. So, where am I going here? Bring it on. Okay. At your November 16th work session, you passed 4 motions, and that's why we're here today. We'd like to give you an update on the first 3, which were your requests to eliminate the sunset date in the current ordinances, conduct education and outreach with the community, reduce Ward 7 rest stops, and then finally, continue your conversation about a potential dispersal policy.
So regarding the motion that the sunset date should be eliminated, this requires an ordinance amendment. A public hearing has been scheduled for February 21st with the potential for the council to take action at their meeting on February 27th. Since the November 16th work session, we've received requests from different groups in the community to provide information on the Rest Stop program. We've been working with the president of Southeast Neighbors Association, Heather Silicki, about interest in her neighborhood and several other efforts that she's engaged with. We've also visited and are working with Churchill area neighbors about interest in finding a rest stop site in their neighborhood. We visited River Road and Santa Clara community organizations and have been in continued conversations with Whitaker Community Council. As specific ideas arise, we also meet with community partners to discuss potential opportunities to leverage resources and share information. So, for example, since November, we've met with 4J School District, a U of O planning class, and a variety of individuals. We've also promoted the program and the Rest Stop video online and sent info out to over 200 subscribers through the community bulletin. So this is all to say that there is interest in different parts of the community, and we are continuing to work in an ongoing way with a variety of groups.
At your November 16th work session, you passed a motion to recognize that activity related to social services and homelessness is more condensed in Ward 7. And so we've been doing some work in Ward 7 to start addressing that. First, we've been in conversations with the neighborhood about safety. So both EPD and CMO neighborhood staff have been in ongoing conversations with Whitaker Community Council about the issues that they're experiencing and thinking about how we can help start to address those. That has led to improved communication overall. The city manager has met with the WCC president several times, and we continue to talk with them on a regular basis about the experiences that they're having really regularly. And then finally, at your request to move Rest Stop out of Ward 7, if we're able to find another site, we have been working towards finding an alternate site for NHS. As you'll recall, their current agreement and our current agreement with the mission expires this week. And while we haven't been able to find a Rest Stop site for them, we have an interim solution so that we can continue work looking for a stable site for them outside of Ward 7. So our temporary solution, and we're in early conversations with community-supported shelters and NHS about this, is to prioritize openings in community-supported shelters' existing rest stops, and they believe that they can take half of the group in one. And then they've offered to lend us 6 Conestoga huts for the car camping program, which would allow for the other NHS residents to continue living in safe shelter while we pursue our longer-term goal of finding them a stable site. And then finally, you wanted us to come back so that you could further explore a potential dispersal policy. And there are recommendations that we have whether or not you choose to go forward with a dispersal policy. And the first is that we need to stabilize the Rest Stop program before we think about expanding the program. We need time to explore the capacity of the system. We're not sure if the existing operators could operate additional rest stops or not. And then we'd like time to allocate the $25,000 that you approved on Supplemental Budget 1 in December. To do that, we'll work through our regular public contracting regulations, and so that will likely result in an RFP. So we'll be working on criteria and issuing that in the near future. And then we'd recommend that we start with interested neighborhoods. We've had several neighborhoods approach us wanting to find a rest stop site in their area. And so obviously, because we're already in conversations with them and they have a stronger understanding of the program than some other areas, we could start working with them. We'd recommend a phased approach because we can focus our resources, our city resources, on finding sites one at a time. That's probably the best use of our time and what we're able to do. And then finally, in our last work session, we did recommend that we establish task teams. So we'd start with the neighborhoods that have expressed interest. We could include businesses or area schools. And we just recommend having a focus group that could help us think about where to site a rest stop. And as a reminder, in any of these instances, all of these would come back to you for approval of those rest stop sites. So we have taken all of those and put them in a potential motion for your consideration today. And that is move to direct the city manager to 1, stabilize current rest stops, and 2, work with task teams in different wards in a phased approach, starting with interested neighborhoods to find additional rest stop sites outside of Ward 7. And that's all we have today.
Okay, comments, Alan? Anybody? Mike? Any? Claire? Okay, Alan.
Can you more clearly define what you mean by stabilize?
So as you know, we don't have a more permanent location for one of our rest stops, Nightingale Health Sanctuary. As mentioned, the current agreement for their rest stop with the mission expires this week. We will be looking to extend that temporarily while we look for a temporary solution and try to find a more stable site. So by stabilizing, we're saying we need a better and more permanent spot for NHS.
Excuse me, are we going to talk about that later today?
Which part?
Nightingale? And that.
And we can talk about, the intent would be to talk about it now if you have questions or thoughts about that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'd like us to do that.
Which?
To find a more permanent place for them. And so how's that process going, and when do you think we'll find a spot, and are there any potential spots in the offing?
Well, as Mia mentioned, right now we are planning to move about half of them into existing CSS vacancies in their rest stops. And so that doesn't increase the total number of people, community-supported shelters. As you know, they manage and operate a couple of our rest stops. They do have vacancies, and so some of the Nightingale folks can move into those vacancies temporarily. So it doesn't increase the overall numbers of people in those rest stops. They just migrate some of the Nightingale folks into that. And then in addition to that, community-supported shelters has said they would provide 6 Conestoga huts, which are an eligible shelter for the car camping program, which we could then provide them as part of the car camping program. CSS would also continue to manage those particular items of the car camping program. And then the intent would be is to find a permanent rest stop outside of Ward 7. What we've talked about before and what we're proposing is that the priority for the first permanent rest stop be Nightingale, if at all possible. And so not just adding additional capacity at the moment, but to ensure that there's a stable site for them, which is item 1 here, is to stabilize that site and then continue to look for additional capacity in other wards.
And remind the folks who are watching what happened to the Nightingale lease or spot, why they need to move.
You're referring to the mission site?
Yeah,
Right.
it
So,
was just a time period ended. That mission was allowing them to be there.
well, in August, the lease agreement with Lane County to use their property ended. And at that time, Nightingale moved to the mission with the understanding that that would be a 6-month time frame. And so we've reached the end of that period.
And what I would say, a couple of things, talking with the mission director, Jack Tripp, he's been very satisfied actually with the Nightingale rest stop as far as how that's worked for them. we did make a commitment to Whitaker and to Ward 7 that it was temporary, and our intent was not to keep that particular rest stop at the Mission as a permanent rest stop. And so we're working hard to fulfill that intent and commitment as well.
And 7 Conestoga huts for car camping. My understanding is that we have more people on the list than we have sites for car camping. And so that might be nice, but it may not result in 6 more car camping sites or car campers.
Right. Well, St. Vincent de Paul manages the car camping program as we know it today. I think what we're thinking about is that CSS has now offered to sponsor a car camping site by providing these Conestoga huts, which they do on various locations throughout the city, such as church parking lots and things like that. So this would be outside of the St. Vincent de Paul program.
So community service, what is it? Community
Supported shelters.
Supported shelters, CSS. I know why they have an acronym. They're offering to find new spots,
Correct.
basically. Okay. So the approach that I don't understand, though, is I understand the need to stabilize that and find that, but wouldn't part 2 potentially lead to that site?
Yes.
And so they're not necessarily sequential because it says and. So they could be going on at the same time, and part 2 could lead to a site for the Nightingale folks.
Yes.
Okay, that's what I thought. Thank you.
Mike?
Thank you, Mayor. You just mentioned some of the folks maybe being able to fill in with some of the other openings that are available at CSS stuff. We got an email from Valerie Chase earlier about them wanting to stay together as a unit. Did I read that right? So that's still in negotiation as to whether or not they're going to be able to fill in those spaces or not?
What I would say is we've made the commitment to move the Nightingale site off of the Mission. We know that our intent is to provide a permanent site in which they can reside together. It will be some time before that actually occurs. And so this is a transition period over the next numbers of time period in which that group will be separated. And then the intent would be to bring them back together in a permanent site.
In the end of this, in point 2 there, where you say starting with interested neighborhoods, can I get a little more detail on that? I know, for example, that I've had some constituents of mine in Santa Clara who are involved in the neighborhood association who mentioned their interest in working on this. And I know a bunch of other folks in the neighborhoods in Santa Clara who had a different kind of response. The first time that one particular property was proposed over there on the other side of Fred Meyer. They were not in agreement, those 2 inputs I got from similar constituents. So my question is, the way this reads, is the neighborhood association in charge? Is that what I'm understanding to be the only point of kind of organization and work here? Or are you getting what manner of feedback are you getting from area residents? How are you working with folks that are living nearby and potential places? Can you?
So I think as we see it, we'd start with folks that have approached us. So a number of neighborhood associations have invited Reagan to provide a presentation on the program so that they could learn more about it. In addition to that, we've had neighborhood associations and then individuals independent of neighborhood associations and organizations independent of neighborhood associations come forward in wanting to assist us in finding sites. If we were to identify sites through conversations with them, then we'd go back to our regular process, which would then be to conduct outreach and learn more about what others thought about, the other thoughts that folks had about the sites. And then again, we'd come back to council and bring that feedback to council for your approval of a site before we'd start operating.
Cool, excellent, thank you. The last thing is, this is kind of separate, but it's the same issue. It involves the car camp. St. Vincent de Paul operates the one Alton Baker parking lot, yes? How many spaces are there for car camping there?
There's 4 at Alton Baker Park.
Did I hear you say that we're going to do additional ones with CSS, or that we would be transitioning the management of that to CSS? Which,
So CSS already oversees a number of car camping sites throughout town on private property. And so we'd be exploring both private and public properties for the 6 that CSS has offered.
I don't mean this to sound very negative, because I've always thought that the car camping there had, the way St. Vincent de Paul ran it, based on what I know, seemed beneficial, seemed like a good option. But 2 people have been killed there in the last year, and we haven't really talked much about that. And so I wonder if we have a responsibility to have that conversation or not. One in May and one here just a few months ago. So I don't know what part that should be playing in this conversation.
Well, I don't think we presuppose that those car camping slots are at Alton Baker Park.
Okay.
That's not a presupposed at the time. I think it's what we've said, and what CSS has said is, yes, we would be helpful in finding a car camping site. We don't know where that site is yet. And so it's not necessarily Alton Baker Park.
Okay. I know that I'm going to get a bunch of questions about that from some particular folks, so I thought I would, kind of approach that. The other then would be, I'd be interested to know, it doesn't have to be today, but any follow-up we've had with the folks at St. Vincent de Paul after those 2 events about the management style there, because it seems like there might be opportunities for growth and learning under those circumstances. So I'd just be interested with some follow-up information. Thank you.
Claire?
Thank you. Well, Alan asked a number of my questions, even used some of my exact language, like simultaneously. So I'll just reiterate that if we're going to do this work, which I think is good work, then it needs to be done at the same time, that we're not just waiting to find Nightingale a new spot, and then we start working with the neighborhoods, that we're doing all this simultaneously. So some questions I'll ask then that weren't asked yet. And you mentioned individuals as, part of the interested parties. Have you guys had the ability to reach out to folks who have commercial or industrial property that might actually benefit by some of the caretaking aspects of having people either car camp there or site a rest stop? Is there any traction around that kind of property?
So, as you know, we've been looking for a more permanent site for NHS for 2 years. And in that time, and not since November 16th, but over the course of those 2 years, we have certainly reached out to private property or commercial property owners to find out if they'd be interested in hosting a site.
And so far, no takers?
No takers.
And in terms of the neighborhoods that have specifically expressed interest in working on this program, are there any actual potential sites being considered in those neighborhoods, or is it just an idea at this point that they want to support?
Not that I know of. Well, Churchill Area Neighbors has indicated interest in looking for a site in their ward. I don't know that they have any sites in mind. There have been a couple of sites mentioned in the southeast area that we're in continuing conversations about. Yeah.
So potentially some actual places. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then I just wanted to clarify and make sure I had a correct understanding of any of the changes we made to our ordinance. When we first adopted the rest stop ordinance, staff wouldn't do work on vetting a potential site in terms of neighborhood reaction until after the city council had considered and approved the site. And my understanding is now you will actually do some of that footwork before bringing a potential site to the council. Is that correct?
Correct.
And this is speaking to what Councilor Clark raised. I think I'm very glad to hear that neighborhood associations are inviting you to present on the program. I think that's a really positive thing. And then we also need to keep in mind that folks who are interested are not all necessarily attached to their neighborhood association. And so we do really need to be mindful of making sure the word gets out to other folks who might not have been able to attend that meeting. And then lastly, I don't know if you have more information about the RFP process that you mentioned, and what are some thoughts you all had on how the limited amount of funds that we did dedicate might be used or programmed? We have started developing RFP criteria. We've talked to both the steering committee members of Nightingale Health Sanctuary as well as Eric DeBurr of Community Supported Shelters to get their thoughts, and we'll continue to develop those. Obviously, this is the first time that we'll be expending funds in this way on the program, and so we want to be very transparent about how we're doing that and clear with the public about the benefit. And do you have any examples of suggestions that come from those conversations of how the actual money would be used?
Well, we actually have agreements with each of the operators that will give us a starting point. So, things like experience required of the person who actually signs an agreement and is responsible for operation of the site and that kind of thing.
I'm sorry, my question is, what would the money be used for? Would it be used to help fund the porta potty at the site, or put up fencing, or pay a staff person? That was kind of what I was asking.
So the direction that we received from the conversation at the Budget Committee, which then came to you as a council last spring, was that it could be used for either setup or operations.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. And Chris?
Thank you. I agree with a lot of what's been said, and I think we're moving in the right direction. I can absolutely support this. Sequentially or simultaneously, consecutively, however you want to do it. I think they do support each other. The aspect for me is what's attractive here is we're trying to craft a process here that is built around encouraging and persuading neighborhoods to want to have a rest stop rather than forcing a rest stop. I think if we were to try to go down the path of forcing a rest stop in every ward, we would wind up, defeating ourselves and creating a very bad response around the whole rest stop idea. I think by doing this is more of a form of outreach and trying to persuade people that this is a workable thing, and to demonstrate the success we've had with the rest stops already created, I think is also an element that will make this successful, so that as we go into the neighborhoods, we can get a better sense of what the response and the reaction will be. It's more than just the neighborhoods. Associations, but it's also more than just the one or two people who don't want those people in their neighborhood, and so we have to find what the right balance is. And I'm also thinking part of the operational aspect of this is the car camping program, because I think people judge the success of whatever the response to the homeless is by each element of it. And I know, for example, just today I was driving the back way to the Walmart in my neighborhood, and there's a car camp near that Walmart, and the amount of trash and garbage and stuff all over the street there was just absolutely appalling. And Walmart actually had to send a crew of their own staff people out with barrels and stuff to pick up all the trash around there. And so we need to figure out a way for the car camping program to demonstrate, just like we do with the rest stops, that this program can be managed and operated in a way that doesn't create a really negative impact on the neighborhoods, or I am going to have a very tough time selling anything to my neighborhood. And my neighborhood, as you point out, is already receptive and is encouraged to try to find something. But if what they see from some of the elements operating is just this incredible amount of, I don't want to call it mismanagement, but isn't operating well, it's going to make it twice as hard for me to try to convince folks to make this work. So whatever we need to do with our partners to ensure that these are managed in a way that looks very professional, managed, and well run is the degree to which I can persuade folks that we want to have more of them in my ward, because I want to do that. And I'm actively working to try to identify sites, but it's going to be hard if the stuff they do see in their neighborhood looks as bad as what I saw today.
I have two more in the queue, but I do want to ask something following on Chris's comments, which is about the car camping program. And if in the course of your outreach for rest stops, you have any sense that maybe it would be easier in some parts of town to simply expand the car camping, which doesn't require as much of a site, it's not as, big a commitment. Do you have any sense of that?
Well, when we think about the car camping program, we're really limited by the resource that St. Vincent de Paul has. While we pay them for the program, they have one person that staffs the car camping program. And so it makes it challenging to expand the program unless it reaches a tipping point when they can hire an additional person or something. That's most of our limitation. Otherwise, community members really step up around the car camping program, and we don't generally have to seek sites. And you could speak to a recent meeting of local churches in which one of them has sort of taken the lead in asking others to find additional car camping sites on their properties. And there are a lot of conversations about car camping that occur like that in the community.
So that does seem like a promising avenue to do in simultaneously with the rest stop. If we can expand those more quickly, those roll out faster, more people get served more quickly because it is so difficult to find the sites and manage them better. So, okay, so I have Mike, Alan, and Claire.
Thank you, Mayor. My question is for City Attorney. Forgive me for trying to formulate this question on the fly here. I heard about something at lunch today I've had no time to do any reading about, but a lawsuit in the city of Portland that was around the idea of appropriate zoning. So my question, I think, is how are we covering ourselves for what would be a use outside of typical zoning and having other effects? My understanding is that there's a suit in Portland now against the city for having allowed a camp that measurably affected someone's property value, and they're suing for the difference. And they're citing that it was contrary to the city's zoning laws to allow that use. So my question is, A, if you know anything about that suit, because like I said, I just heard about it today and I don't know any details about it. And number two, are we protected from that for some reason? Have we thought that through? I mean, are we feeling comfortable that we're not in a similar liability potential?
So I have looked at the maybe 3 or 4 months ago case that came out of Portland regarding the zoning, but it doesn't sound like that's the one you're speaking about, that this is a more recent one. The one, it was the right to rest with the industrial zoning in that whole case. That was maybe 3 or 4 months ago. We did take a look at that case. If there's a more recent case than that, I'm not aware of that, but I can certainly look into that. When it comes to, we have looked at the issues around zoning and the program as we have it, the way it is working, we think it is consistent. We have with our zoning requirements, Portland's zoning code and land development code is exorbitantly different than Eugene's. It's worded differently, it's written differently, and the differences are marked when you look at the decision. So the right to rest decision that came out of the courts, if you look at the wording that it was based on, it's just extremely different than the city of Eugene's. I can look further into the other case that you're referencing to see what it is.
Can you, other than it's just real different, can you help me understand?
I can give you we did take a look at it, and it was though right when it came out, so 3 or 4 months ago. Happy to provide that in a follow-up information. I don't want to. We looked at it to see what the decision was, caused concerns. We saw, and what we always do when we look at cases out of other jurisdictions, are there differences in the facts that would lead us to a different conclusion? And the answer there was yes.
A lot of my questions at this table come through conversations I have with constituents and with others. And so I figure where one or two people are going to ask me something, there might be a lot of other people who want to know. So I'm willing to ask them out loud, thinking that those who are watching the council meeting might benefit from having that information. So could you tell me the subtle differences in our zoning laws or the Portland zoning laws that make us exempt? Or
Not off the top of my head, no.
Okay.
I looked at the case, like I said, 3 or 4 months ago. Happy to provide that information to you, though. I wouldn't want to get it wrong on the fly.
I see.
So,
Okay.
But we certainly can provide you the distinctions.
Thank you very much.
Claire,
Oh, was that?
were you up? Yeah, I think so. Alan's passing for later.
Okay. So just something I noted. So our ordinance provides for a rest stop to have up to 20 residents, but we could actually open rest stops that are smaller than that. So I just raised that. I mean, obviously, I want to expand our capacity of our rest stops, and one of my concerns right now is it sounds like we're going to potentially, one path is to absorb the Nightingale Health Sanctuary into current rest stops, so we're not expanding capacity, but the goal would be to find them their own spot. But I just want to raise that folks who might be feeling like, well, I don't want 20 people here, there could be an opportunity to do 10 or somehow moderate that amount. And then I am not an attorney, and I'm also speaking on the fly, but my understanding is the case that Councilor Clark is referring to is a new suit, and it's about the downtown site. And I believe the city never made that site legal, that the property, my understanding is the property owner's been in violation of city code by having that site there, and I don't think the city ever took any action to make it legal. So I think that is part of, if that's the case, that would be why they would be vulnerable to a
I
lawsuit.
just want to understand that.
So,
And I'll hunt down that and see what I can find out and provide that information, because I know that would be helpful.
so that's what I know.
Thank you.
Okay, Alan, you want to, everyone had a chance to speak who needs to? Okay, Alan?
Move to direct the city manager to 1, stabilize current rest stops, and 2, work with task teams in different wards in a phased approach, starting with interested neighborhoods to find additional rest stops outside of Ward 7.
Second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? 2, 4, 6, 7, 8. I counted all the way to 8 in favor.
Is that the first time?
The last time I said universal.
Right.
Called it minutes.
Universal. Everybody in the universe.
Thank you very much for that report and for that work.
It only took us half hour.
And we did it fast, so we're good. We're all good. Okay. Welcome.
No, she's still
And
there.
so the next topic is the downtown wayfinding system.
Thank you, Mayor, and I'll turn it over to Renee and her team for the presentation.
Okay, thank you. For those at home, I'm Renee Gruby, the Director of the Library, Recreation, and Cultural Services Department. And I'm joined here by our project manager on the Wayfinding Project, who is Kim Mass from Public Works Administration, John Bozio from Merge Consultants, and Lauren, Hilliard. And Kim will give you a little bit more about them when I turn it over to her. But just to start, as you may recall, we had a cultural policy review years ago, and this is one of those outstanding items that had called for a comprehensive wayfinding signage program for our downtown. And so we're really happy to be here to give you an update on where we are, the work that we've been doing the last couple of years to develop this, that eventually we'll be able to actually implement for our community. But it's also one of those things that we identified in our baker's dozen of our economic prosperity, which is around cultural tourism. And this project is a great community partnership with Arts and Business Alliance, Traveling County, and a number of stakeholders that we've been working with all along. It's really, amongst other things, something we've been trying to put a lot of focus on around giving a positive first impression for our downtown, one that allows visitors and residents to feel safe, to be able to efficiently get around downtown, and to really increase our accessibility. It also helps us strengthen our identity and will highlight many of our really strong cultural arts in the downtown, which is how we started this process, but it has evolved. And so I'm going to turn it over to Kim to talk about where we are today, and then on you go.
Hello. Thank you for having us here tonight. So back in the fall of 2014, we developed this task team to look at this issue, and we did some research, and this was mostly with our partners and our city staff. And we determined that this was a bigger project than we were comfortable taking on. It's a complex process. It sounds like it's not, but it really is complex. So from there, we went through an RFP process, and Merge was the successful contractor. And so in the winter of 2015, we worked with Merge and identified our goals and our objectives, and then moved through to spring 2015, where Merge came to Eugene and spent 3 days on the ground, walking around, talking to people. We had over 90, we had interviews with over 90 people. We had from businesses, the U of O, police, Arts Council. It was extensive. And from that, all those conversations, Merge went back and developed recommendations, what they heard, what we could possibly do to move this thing forward. So in summer, they had done some work. They came back in the summer and presented to those same people and showed what they thought would be a good way to move forward. Then fall of 2015, we worked very diligently to look through the plan, make sure everything was as it needed to be, made sure it met the goals that we had outlined in the beginning, and we finalized that document. So the analysis and the plan was set. So in the winter of 2016, we moved into phase 2 and prepared the scope of what this next phase would be, where we contracted with Merge, continuing that relationship, and Merge did a lot of work in their in-house studio, working on programming and design and mapping and things like that. And the programming is really where we're sending people and what do we want to direct to. So this is where it gets really in depth. So the fall, we got them connected with Project for Public Spaces, because although we're working on pedestrian wayfinding, this also works with placemaking, and those two have a nexus that support each other. So, and then we are where we are today in the winter of 2017. Merge is back. We are getting down to the details, taking photos, documenting specifics of where things can go, and fact checking and making sure that routes are accurate, and really want to make sure that that's, we don't send somebody in the wrong direction. But we're not only sending them to other places, but considering the boundaries, our arbitrary sort of area was from the Willamette River down to 13th and Washington over to Hilliard. So it encompasses the edges of the downtown, where we can say Whitaker is just beyond this, or U of O is this way, South Eugene this way, and Autzen Stadium, Alton Baker Park, things like that. So get them out and then also direct them back to downtown for food and other activities. So with that, I think I will turn it over to John.
I'll just keep it on the slide for a moment. The chart that you see up on on the screen there is sort of when we think about wayfinding, we think about it holistically. So when we did the master plan, which was that first phase of the project, we considered everything from how to use your phone to find your way to what kind of information you get before you arrive, what kind of printed components can be used like brochures and maps, and how does that all talk to each other. So as we got into phase two, the phase two concentration really is on the signage component of that master plan. There's also talk about how we bring in Wi-Fi to kiosks and maybe iBeacons where we're pushing information to people, but there was a discussion about a variety of different wayfinding tools. Tonight what we're going to concentrate on is the signage because that's the component that we've moved together in more detail. Just for Merge, we're an environmental graphic design firm and we focus on wayfinding. We have a very specific expertise working with communities, and we've worked with more than 75 communities nationwide, including Asheville and Austin and Missoula, Montana. We're also working in Hillsboro, Oregon. So hopefully we've brought a lot of sort of that experience with us. Just what's out there. I always like to show what's out there first. So there's a variety of signs. You don't have a sign system, you just have signs. They're all different sizes, colors, mounting heights. And what we're trying to do is organize that to present a consistent communication package. We do not build signs either. We are just designers and planners. That will go out so you can get competitive bids on the fabrication. It's also that we're trying not to add to what's out there. You're going to take down signs and you're putting up something that's more consistent. So if you get to a location where there's 3 or 4 signs, now it's going to be one and it's going to be organized and configured. Wayfinding is important. It does have an economic impact, and what we've seen in the different places that we worked, Asheville is probably the best example. Signage alone does not sort of increase visitorship or increase overnight stays, but as part of a package of communication tools, it is a very important thing. And if you look at, say, the International Downtown Association, they've ranked wayfinding as one of their top 10 initiatives that downtowns can do because they see that value. And these are just some facts that we found in Asheville where 11% of the people surveyed prior to the system going up said that they would extend their stay. And we all know that overnight stays is a big deal. And after that system went up, the River Arts District is probably one of their best success stories. But they saw an increase in visitation in 2014. 4 years later, it has gone up over and over because people are finding their way. They're discovering more things. And it's really about discovering stuff as much as it is about getting people from point A to point B. We came back in phase one, and besides just doing the wayfinding analysis and master plan, we also presented 3 design options. And we got a lot of feedback from stakeholders. We had public meetings on those 3 options, and we've now narrowed it down to option number 4, sort of the final design. We had a basis for design that was our option 2 that we had presented, and there were certain things of each of those components that we designed that people wanted us to include. So what you're going to see is sort of a combination of all the comments that we got back and making it into a final version. I think one of the key parts, and what's a little bit different about this system from other cities that we've done, is that there was a real need for opportunities to include local artists and where and how we can do that in the project, and we'll sort of point that out. The first part is the pedestrian signage. And there's a menu of sign types that are included in this, and this has a variety of sort of functionalities of when you're arriving into downtown. So from left to right, there are pedestrian directional signs. In the center are totems, and on the far right are maps. And if you go from right to left, the way this sort of the philosophy of how information appears is that if you were to approach downtown by foot, say from the university, you would get orientation maps that just tell you basically where you are in relationship and give you sort of overall directions to say downtown this way, shopping and dining, and giving you sort of broader strokes of information. If you were to arrive by car and you've parked, and we're going to talk about parking because that became a component of this, and you've parked your car, now you've come out of the parking garage. As you exit that pedestrian exit, there will be totems, which is the middle group. I don't have my pointer, I'm like going like this. That middle group of totems. So as you exit the parking garage, now you're going to get information. This is where you are in downtown, and then directional information to say, a WOW is to your left, or the county courthouse is to your right. And then to the left are actual directional signs. So then when you get sort of more into the core of downtown where attractions are nearby within a couple minute walk, then you're getting a heavier list of information as to where those things are.
There might be a pointer in that.
Is there?
There is. If you push, there's a...
I'm afraid to turn it off. You'll see on the sides, we have two options. On the side of the panel, we've brought in this option of even bringing in art or just having sort of funky typefaces to identify the street that you're on. You'll notice the directional signs have the minutes, the distance, as well as, it doesn't show it up there, but there will be directions back to the parking garages. So not only is you're getting people to where you parked, but you're getting that return. These are the totems where we've tried to bring in the play of light with some of the elements. The stencil cut at the bottom that you see is sort of a geometric shape. That is just a placeholder, and the idea there is where local artists can create the patterns for us, and we'll incorporate that into the design. The orientation maps, these will be on the sort of the edges of town, where we have another art opportunity on the top component, and the artistic finial. So you see that at the top. We did something similar in Asheville where we had artistic finials, that's been up for 7 years, and they still look good. We even did glass blown finials, so we're comfortable with that. That will work. On the far left there, you start to see information hubs and kiosks, and this is where we can bring technology into the component or into the system, maybe an interactive screen. We've talked about having Wi-Fi on these. We've also talked about having iBeacons so that as you walk by, it can push information to your phone if you have, say, a Downtown Eugene app. And again, there are opportunities for the art component at the bottom. There's interpretive signs, which are in the center, and then also understanding the bike share program, if there's a way to coordinate that with the bike share program, so we're sort of just coordinating the wayfinding information with the bike stands, and so we'd like to do that. Again, just the opportunities for either on the side of the sign or at the top. And then now we're starting to look at that criteria for the kiosks, what kind of hardware needs to be in there. So a lot of those decisions are sort of our next step to work with staff and look at budgets and that sort of thing as to what we can do. And then the type of information that might be included. So whether it's maps for downtown, directional information, maybe interpretive stories telling people about the character and culture of Eugene, also promoting events. If we can do advertisements, I'm sure that's a whole nother conversation that might have to happen. So these are just some 3D renderings. I'm not Lauren. Maybe jump in here. These are some 3D renderings of the information kiosks.
So we just kind of took a look at the roof structure. The previous design version just kind of had an arc as the roof, but we kind of explored using the shape of the buttes as that roof canopy.
And the surface.
And the surface at the bottom, we actually were thinking about using the old cobblestone from the old Willamette trolley. So using that as kind of a base and then having a plate that kind of has a inscription that tells you where that cobblestone came from and the years and everything like that.
So there's opportunities. When you talk about wayfinding, yes, there's a very simple functional aspect of how you get people from point A to point B, but there's opportunities to sort of create that sense of place, and you're going to hear from the Project for Public Spaces on Wednesday. But there's opportunities in there to tell about your history, integrate that into the design more so than just, okay, go this way, go that way. There's these other layers that we try to bring into it.
So this was just a different look at that roof of using two different elements instead of the one piece. And again, just some more 3D renderings of the kiosk sign, having that eye at the top to let you know there's information, a directional sign where perhaps that's an artist opportunity on the side panel. And then we started to look at doing some photo renderings of placing the signs into the space so you can start to see how that works. This is near the Holt Center. We thought about integrating a sign into the existing structure that's already out there. This is an example of the totem that would be outside of the parking garage. So when you exit, you get information right there. This is at the LTD station, maybe we can use existing columns or structures to place a map or directional information.
So we are trying to look at existing structures. You'll see with the pedestrian sign, so if there is a pole that we can attach to, not putting more vertical elements as much as possible, just sort of holding back.
And
I always say that, then I show this one with a vertical element.
And then again, just that directional sign. And again, mounting to an existing pole versus having a new pole. And then this is just looking at that information hub and how that can start to work. We thought that near the library was a space that is a gathering hub for people, so that's a good area. And then we also took a look at the orientation map. So we've started to highlight the destinations downtown in the dark blue, and they are recognized with the red numbers on there. And then we've also started to fill in some of the buildings that are in the downtown as kind of a layer in the back.
And what we've tried to do is to improve the map that's currently used. So there's things on here like little 3D drawings of the sculptures that give you an orientation, because we all use landmarks to get our orientation to where we are. So that's a component of wayfinding. We try to highlight Broadway and Willamette as a really key intersection, and if you know where those two streets are, you get an orientation. You have a infrastructure of numbered streets, so you have a built-in wayfinding tool. As if I'm on 2nd and I have to go to 8th, I know I'm going in the right direction. I know how far I have to go. So that we've tried to sort of emphasize that on the sides of the signs and those kind of things to take advantage of sort of what you have already. And then we've shown this project from Newark Walks, which Lauren and I worked on last year, which is a mobile app that gives you a tour of downtown, and it gives you history about the place. And there's not additional signs other than interpretive signs. You can find that tour through your app or through a printed piece, and it guides you around. So it's another thing that we're considering as we go through this. And parking garages. As we did our master plan, one of the things I said to the group was that when you think of your arrival to downtown Eugene, your parking garages are a gateway. So a gateway is not necessarily just on the edges of town where you put up a post and panel sign. Think about somebody coming for the first time and they park in the garage, they get out of their car, and that's their opportunity to sort of get their first impression. So whether that's walking up to the elevator bank or as they exit the parking garage, what kind of information they get. If you lose that connection, you can do the pedestrian signs, but you're probably going to aggravate or frustrate people before they even get to that point. So making it easy to get to the parking garages, identifying them, because right now they're all identified in completely different manners. If you look at the Broadway garage, you can't even tell that's a public. First time visitor, I'm not first time anymore. First time visitor, that looks like it's for a condo or an apartment building. So one of the things we wanted to do was say that you can get this to be more consistent, so I can easily find parking and start that wayfinding journey in an organized manner. So there are basically two levels of signage and wayfinding for the garage. The exterior, which is where we have the opportunity to brand the parking, so I know I can follow that P to get to parking, and then making it more organized in the garages. We've met with Jeff and the parking group and have walked all the garages. Your garages, from a signage standpoint now, I mean, they've done a really nice job in making sure there's no clutter in them. So it's more about getting it to be a little bit more consistent and providing some additional information. With parking, it's also a little bit of a puzzle. So we wanted to identify exteriors where you brand it. When you get in the garage, you want to have color coding from level to level, and then the functional signage, so where we're directing to parking and exit, is just sort of black and white and simple.
So these are the exterior signs, just some simple trailblazers directing with the P and the arrow to the parking garages, or having that P and just say the simple message of public parking. When you get to maybe the surface lots, there might need to be an ID sign that tells you what lot you're at. And then at the Broadway garages, we noticed a different condition where the pedestrians can enter back into the garages through the doors. So there's nothing really there kind of identifying that that's the entrance back to the garage. So adding a sign near there and on the doors just to highlight that that's another entrance back. And then again, branding those garages on the exterior. So having a consistent treatment of that, having the name, Pearl Street Garage at the top, and then a simple exit and entrance sign. And then we'd have the flag-mounted sign with just a large P, and again, identifying that it's public parking.
And that's the key, public parking, letting people know that that garage is for everybody. It's not just for an office building or anything like that. And every garage would have the same components attached to it, whether they're reconfigured a little bit, but the P and the public parking all the time.
So these are some of the interior signs just directing you to parking, to exit, to the cash checkout and things like that. The elevator banks, branding those with the level color, also identifying which elevator you're at and where you're going to exit to. So what street are you exiting to when you leave this?
So that's a really key wayfinding component. I get out of my car, or I'm a business owner, and I tell somebody, park in the Holt garage. You want to take the north stairwell. When you come out, you're going to be on 10th Street. And then when you get there, it's telling you, that information. So before you go down that stairwell where I'm going to be.
So we took a look at some of the floor plans and just kind of did a scenario of where some of those sign types would be in the garages and where you'd find them. So we also did some photo renderings of just how we can brand the space with the different floor levels and colors, some super graphics of letting you know where the elevator banks are, what floor you're on. Having a fun pattern on the columns and, again, painting it that color for the floor.
If you go through them now, they are color-coded in very odd ways. It doesn't really line up. It's not for color coding the work, you really have to coat the space, and you really have to be very consistent in the way that you do it.
So, again, wrapping the columns or painting the stairs with that color. Just some super graphics of, letting you know.
You really do need to slow down there, too. That's corkscrew.
And then, again, just branding that space with the level number. And this was interesting because some of the garages, it's hard to tell which level you're on. So having that graphic continue across the floor will let you know, you're still on 5 or you've transitioned into 4. And then, again, just identifying those elevators, or this could be an opportunity where you can have a welcome to Eugene graphic.
So that gives you an idea of where we are. We currently, we're in town going through with staff, going out into the field and looking at all the locations and sort of working through that component. We presented this presentation, design development, to the steering committee today, showed the materials and actual color samples and that sort of thing. So we're sort of at that bridge between concept and documentation.
That's great. It's fun. It's really fun to think about and look at. So thank you for that. And in the queue, I have Chris first and then Mike.
Thank you. Really am impressive work that's been done so far in terms of thinking and kind of working through the elements. This is absolutely a classic branding process. That's really what we're doing. And as you kind of work your way down the different levels of what branding is, this is at the top level, which is identity branding. How do we create a similar look, a similar appeal, a similar consistent image, so that as you move around town, the identity is very consistent, very much the same. And all the ideas and elements you've come up with look very good. I think for 2021, that amount of identity branding is probably going to be necessary and essential. And then I start thinking, okay, let's move into the next level, which is the concept branding. Which is not really here yet. You're still working on the whole notion of the concept, but what is the concept that Eugene will want to convey as its brand in 2021? Will that concept be athletic? Will it be fun? Will it be welcoming? And how will we incorporate that concept brand into the identity brand? And so we need to have some conversation about what is the concept brand that Eugene wants to convey in 2021. I think of the Paris Metro, and they use that Art Nouveau type style to convey the Paris Metro because they want to create a concept brand that harkens back to the time when Paris was the center of everything great, and they use that to kind of push the concept out as well as the identity. And then moving into the next level down, which is the relationship branding, and how in addition to all of this material, this identity branding stuff, which is very important to do, we can't ignore the fact we'll also have to work with all of the employees, the public, and everyone else to be able to convey this same brand in their interactions with people. Because if people come to town and they see pretty signage and then they go to interact with somebody in a store and they have a bad interaction with them, that doesn't promote the brand at all. And so a significant part of this branding effort will be, what are we going to do to ensure that we convey the relationship branding element just as effectively as we convey the identity and the concept. And so what I'm looking for is, this is the start, and we can use this as a beginning point to really create that multi-tiered branding effort that's going to really pay off incredibly well when we get to 2021. So I applaud you for the first effort, because I think this is really the start we need to have, and then I'll be looking forward to the opportunity to work our way through the rest of the levels.
Thank you.
Mike?
Thank you, Mayor. As somebody who's spent 25, 30 years in branding and marketing and advertising, I can be kind of a snob about stuff like this. I have to say that was incredibly well done. That was very well done. I was very impressed with that. Well done. I'm excited about seeing that work done. I think that will be very helpful, not just with 2021, although that's very, very important, but it'll help make it easier for people to feel comfortable downtown. Mm-hmm. And we have an awful lot of conversations about public safety and about all the things that we need to make our downtown more welcoming, more comfortable place for people, a more useful place for people. We've had a lot of new businesses enter our downtown lately. And I think this is the kind of natural next step that makes using downtown more comfortable for people. And so I appreciate it, especially when it's that well done. Mm-hmm. I also thought that the different type of signage based on its functionality and its utility was very well done, especially as you mentioned, using parking as that first place where people are going to kind of come out and try and orient themselves. That's very, very smart, I thought. Back about, I guess it was within the last year, both city manager and I were part of we're both judges in an event, the Hack for a Cause thing that was done downtown, where they had some folks do some programming for what might be one idea about the software that would go in use in a wayfinding kiosk, for example. And I just wondered if you were able to I know we had Feeney Wireless and some other folks who were local businesses who were involved in that process. I just wondered if you had a connection point with any of them along this way.
Yes, we do. They've been in some of the informational interviews, and Jeff Petrie is very well connected with that. So yeah, we're building that relationship.
Yeah, so we're at the point now where aesthetically we sort of have the case.
Yeah.
And now we're getting into, okay, what does the content and software want to do within it? So that's what we'll be
Excellent.
doing.
I got to judge the kiosks, as a matter of fact, so I thought that part was pretty cool. I got to know more about that than others. Last question. In both the totems and the kiosks, you had rather large sections at the bottom for what you suggested was local artwork.
Mm-hmm.
Is there, in your experience in other communities, is there a reason why that would not be appropriate advertising space for the city to have a different revenue stream?
That would be a city attorney question. I don't know.
We have for example, our public bus system has signage on it that's an advertising program where the bus company gets and I just wondered if that's an appropriate conversation for us, or if so, is there a reason not to do it?
We have done kiosks where there is advertising on one side of it. So if you have that four-sided, you could do it on either side. It's really based on the zoning and what policy allows in individual cities as far as advertising.
Gotcha.
So we did it in Dallas, but we've had other places where we weren't allowed to do advertising. That's why it sort of was last on the list.
And then I'll just add, one of the things that we'll be working on is what's the phasing of this for implementation, and that revenue sources will be a part of that conversation. But it's also about how do we maintain it and manage it,
right?
So we don't create something that really becomes unwieldy and so.
In this day and age, with the technology allows us some new ideas, and that's why I bring it up, because I've seen, for example, that one of the reasons there's a key benefit in having electronic billboards these days, static picture but electronic capacity, is that you can turn all of them into an instant Amber Alert system,
right,
with the flick of a switch or the keyboard. And if we had that kind of electronic display on each of these sort of things, you might have similar sorts of advantages, where not only do you have an alternating message of some sort that provides new revenue streams for the city, but like I said, also an instant Amber Alert all through downtown, or some kind of capacity to broadcast a message. So.
Yeah, my conversation with municipalities when we get to the kiosk always is, there's lots of things you can do on the kiosk, but you have to sort of be honest with yourself as to your ability to maintain that information, whether it's static or electronic. Where's that content going to constantly come from? And you just sort of have to go through that process and say, well, we can do this and we can't do that. And that's where we are sort of on the cusp of making those decisions.
Thank you very much.
Betty?
Thank you. I thought I was going to get to talk before Mike for once.
Best of luck, Betty.
I've tried, but since he talked before me, I have a reaction to the question about advertising. I think that could be confusing. It could sound as if this is our best thing in town or something, and I think that's probably not a good idea, but as for keeping things up to date, that's really important. It's terrible when you look at a website and it's from last year or 2 years ago, or for anything that if it's out of date, it's worse than nothing. But this looked beautiful, I thought. I think not just for the people who come here in 2021. I think for the people who are here now or as soon as possible. I've been with people who live here who, if we go into a parking garage, are confused if they haven't been there before. It's good for anybody to have clear directions. And if it's beautiful, that's all the better. I was wondering about the elevator that's always out of order. What kind of signs do you put on that?
We actually have a sign type for that. We do. Jeff asked us for it, so we have it.
If you're in a wheelchair, please go back to your car, I should say, I guess. But a question I had was, did you think about seats near some of these signs? I think if people look, they get some information, they might want to sit down and think things over before they decide which place to go. Is that something that came into your...
I think we've had conversations about having benches worked into the kiosk, or we've had conversations about that.
Thank you.
Claire?
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation and the work. I agree with my fellow counselors. It's very elegant and effective, so I'm very excited. I think if we just did the parking garages, that would be a huge improvement. Because I agree with Councilor Taylor, even those of us who live in the area can get confused when we leave one of those garages. And you had some ODOT signage up there in your first presentation. I have to say I don't find ODOT signage very helpful whatsoever across the state. Sorry, ODOT. You could use some help from some experts. Just so, yeah. I think, given our rainy weather, having some cover over those kiosks makes a lot of sense, so folks can stand there and not have to put their umbrella up if they've brought it. And then this idea of changing the signage perhaps at the Broadway, to make it consistent across parking garages. I think that's an excellent idea. Is there any limitation in terms of who has control over the parking garages in terms of us changing the signage or mandating a sign change of any kind? Do we own all the parking garages that we're referring to?
Just city-owned garages.
Yeah, we're only doing public garages.
Okay.
Public space.
And then my last comment is a question, and that's around cultural competency and making sure that our system is accessible as possible for folks from different cultural backgrounds. We have a university, lots of international visitors, and then also folks who might have physical limitations. And so just wanting to make sure that that's in the consideration as we think about what's on the sign or how people can
We've
access
incorporated pictograms, international pictograms for the appropriate, services and destinations. And then from a design standpoint, there are ADA requirements regarding placement and contrast and that sort of thing. There's no braille on the signs, but it's basically placement of, making sure there's a clear path around it, that sort of thing.
Thank you.
Alan?
When you started talking, John, I had to laugh because I had this friend in college that took it upon himself every time someone asked him for directions, he'd purposely tell them to go in the opposite direction to get them lost.
I wouldn't hire him.
Yeah, I'm glad you didn't hire him. This is kind of like modern day breadcrumbs, though, right? I like the colors, the forms, the use of the artists. I thought all that was really well done. I guess the question I have is, what's the cost benefit analysis here? What's the rate of return? What are the results we're going to get? How can we measure success out of this?
Typically what you see with wayfinding programs are that the sort of secondary destinations, which you have sort of a lot of, see the greatest sort of increase in visitation for with wayfinding, because they are relying on the wayfinding system to sort of promote where they are and give people direction. When you have like a big arena or a stadium or a large museum, they have their radio campaigns and they have their shows that are going to draw one way or the other. It's sort of that secondary that you see the rise in visitation. I would love to sit here and tell you that it's a magic bullet that signage solves all revenue generation. It's really this plus multiple sort of communication tools that help drive what we're looking for, which is visitation. What we're looking for is an increase in overnight stays because people decided to either stay longer or come back. They're the kind of things that we're looking for the wayfinding program to increase, and just customer satisfaction. We saw a small town in Arkansas that we did, that Eureka Springs, where it's sort of a bedroom community where you go for a day or two, and the satisfaction in customer service went up, specifically with the signage, from I think it was 32% to 64% before and after the system went in. So it lends itself to that as well.
Do we have in this, Renee, a measurement system that will be able to tell whether or not we've got some success metrics?
I think in our wayfinding master plan, we outlined some different things that we can look at as far as measurements. We can look at the occupancy of the parking garages, which are currently at 85%. We can look at overnight stays. We can work with the tourism group, with Lane County, and with their visitor surveys, and work that in as well.
Yeah, I'd be very interested in following up with that and seeing that. So cell phone app, obviously very important, and that's easy to maintain, update, but how do you deal with maintain and update the non-electronic stuff. It's
For the most part, when we're directing on the static signs and like on the maps, it's at a pretty high level of information. It's all nonprofit, government facilities, parks, and rec. So we are not directing to private businesses on those signs. So they are things that what we're directing to are things that likely are not going to move. The Holt Center is not going to go somewhere. We're not directing to businesses, but that's where the digital component and the print component comes in to, if you want to dig into that level of detail of individual businesses, then you go into the digital component.
Yeah, that's what my next question was. So on that app, how much private stuff and businesses are going to be in there to...
You can tie it into a lot of different data feeds that would provide that, whether it's Google or other information.
Okay. I like the parking stuff. Smart Park in Portland is very easy to find. It's very clear. It's low-cost public parking, easy to find. It's on the apps. Great branding, all that. We do a little color coding on the Pearl Street one. But it's like that on steroids. Right. Is that what we're talking about? Okay. And advertising, Mike, I always thought it would be great in the new city hall that around the council chambers you have a reader board that said, "This AIS brought to you by." And then we could, market it depending on what we were talking about.
Are you done?
Yeah.
More than one way.
Greg?
It's hard to follow the comedy act of Alice Winka, but we'll give it a shot. Yeah, great presentation. I think it's excellent work. 3 questions real quick. One, are we looking at tweaking anything around the city's current branding in terms of logo? I mean, over the last few years, we streamlined our logo, I know. Would this be kind of an updated kind of situation that may kind of change the way that we look in a slightly more modern and open kind of way? I noticed that you had integrated in the butte concept into the coverings and that kind of thing. I'm just wondering if this might be an appropriate time for us to kind of relook at or rethink, maybe even tweaking our brand a little bit.
Yeah, we're not looking at any sort of redesign of the logo. What you'll notice about this project and the majority of our projects, probably like 90% of them, is that you don't see us using logos, city logos, on every single sign. So that's not branding. That's just sticking your logo on every sign. And the reason being is that if it does change, then you got to replace all the signs, and you don't want to get into that. When we looked, and it goes to your comments regarding the brand, we tried to design a system that reflects the experience and the brand of Eugene. So when you think about the nature and the buttes, bringing that shape in without literally doing the logo, thinking about the artistic community and bringing sort of that opportunity into the program, and bringing in the nature when we talked about the history, talking about the cobblestones. It's all in there, but it's at a level or a layer that reflects the experience, but isn't a literal interpretation of it. The colors we picked are not the exact colors, but they are a complement to that. So if you could change the logo all you want, but the sign program is always going to fit the environment in which it's sticking in, and that's what we were trying to do.
Okay, and I think that you probably answered most of my second question, but given that the university is one of our primary draws here, how is this all kind of going to interface with what's going on at the university? And would we be looking at working with the university for them to have a similar wayfinding system on campus that directs people back into the downtown and other, points of interest within the city?
Sure. Within the scope of our project, we are limited from a physical standpoint to the boundaries that Kim mentioned. What we are doing is we are providing information that connects to the university and to other sort of the adjacent districts. So we're saying University of Oregon straight ahead, University of Oregon to the right. They would always have their own system, and that's just standard wayfinding within a community. That what we would want to do is connect our language and terminology at the point where, okay, it's the city system and then it's the university system. This is where they sort of shake hands, but their system takes over. One of the interesting things about the design, and we talked about this with the steering committee today, is that we've always thought about this system with the opportunity to go beyond downtown, and where there are opportunities to bring in the character and culture of adjacent neighborhoods. So that bottom panel where we had the artistic, where that can be something for downtown, that can be a inspired graphic for the university in the university district. It's no different. I took a picture today over at Whole Foods where in the surface by the outdoor seating, they have the track lanes. Right. So you could do something maybe for track, or you could do some other things in that sort of inspiration into the art in those different neighborhoods, and then therefore those neighborhoods are getting ownership into what's going into their community. But again, when I'm a user looking for information, it's the same configuration, same color. I have sort of a trust in the system.
And my last question is this: will we get one of those kind of wayfinding deals that give us an international flavor, like you see in some cities where it's going to be, you're X thousand miles away from Tokyo, so many thousand miles away from New York, that kind of.
We don't have that planned on there now.
There's one out in front of Hayward Field like that.
Yeah, but it's not downtown. It's
Next, that'll be our next.
We're in the center.
Depending on what your center of the universe is, Alan.
Reality, 5 miles.
Ward 3.
Emily?
Thank you, Mayor. Wow, thank you very much. I'm also a graphic designer, marketer, and I've done some orientation and interpretive signs. I'm really impressed with how well you thought everything out, the way you're able to answer all these questions. I can see how very hard you worked. I'm just incredibly impressed. This is the happiest, best thing I've seen the city do forever. So thank you. I really want to see this happen.
Says the graphic artist.
And I'm
You say
just,
that like it's a bad thing.
and I'll just echo that I thought it was just a kind of how great that would be. So I really think it looks great, and we're excited to see the next step. So thank you very much for your work. And do you still have something to say?
So what's the budget? How much is it going to cost? How's this going to play out over time? Is it RFP process?
Right. So we talked a little bit about this today. John and Lauren are kind of getting the kind of last details of where signs are going to be and what, and then they'll go back and develop the budget related to those. It isn't cheap. It's expensive for us as a community, but we anticipate we'll be able to figure out with our partners how to phase that in, and John's going to give us some suggestions on how we might phase it in for the best.
You never see these projects just sort of fall out of the sky and it all lands at once. It's usually a phased process, usually 2 or 3 phases. Parking certainly can be its own thing, so you take that out and do it there. And then the pedestrian signage, we just look at, sort of work inside out is how we do it.
Does he intend to use existing funds like parking funds to do that part, or are we going to see this as a budget item next year?
Well, we haven't.
Renewal monies can maybe.
There will be a number of different sources, I think, for this. As John mentioned, the parking fund will be a part of that, I assume, for the parking pieces. We do have some existing cultural services sub-fund that is generated from transit room tax. There will be a portion of that, and there may be some opportunities through transportation funding, and there's a number of. The beauty of this is it touches so many different parts of our organization, and there will definitely be some areas where we'll need to identify new resources, whether that's with our partners or our tech partners, or
maybe Claire could ask her newfound friends at ODOT.
our new That's a roundabout way of saying we have some work to do to identify that.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. Okay, great. So we have two things left to do. I think we can do them both. We have 7 minutes, so just, we'll try and stay on task. The first is committee reports and items of interest. Does anybody have something they wish to report? Greg, all right, let me make a list. Hang on.
Well, last Wednesday, I was in, Wednesday and Thursday is in Salem for the League of Oregon Cities City Day, which is basically our initial foray into lobbying for the current session of the legislature. Just talking about the league's top priorities, there's 4 priorities that the league is focused on for this session, and that's property tax reform, recreational immunity, which has nothing to do with marijuana. That's about people suing individual representatives of cities when someone has an accident or a fall or some kind of mishap in a park facility or other recreational facility within a city. There is exposure right now for individual representatives of cities. That loophole needs to be closed. So we're working on that. And then transportation funding, the transportation package, and PERS reform. So those are the 4 big ticket items that the league is focused on. That's what we were there to talk to our legislators about. Had a chance to speak with Floyd Brzezinski. I went with the new mayor of Junction City, Mark Crenshaw. So he was he's newly elected, brand new, and has never been in any other elective office before. And so we saw him, James Manning, Julie Fahey, tried to capture Phil Barnhart, but he's very slippery, as well as a few of our other legislators who are all inundated with folks walking the hall. But I just wanted to report that out. I think that there's going to be, of course, all of these items are of interest to us as the city of Eugene, and there are other major items such as education and other pieces that the legislature and the governor are going to be grappling with over the next few months. So that's my report.
Thank you. Betty?
Thank you. I've been asking us to have items for years, months, weeks, sometime. I think we all should have been at City Hall Day. That's the day for councilors, local government people to go to the legislature, and I hope that next year we'll think ahead and all of us go on the train. But things I want to bring up, things that people have been asking me about, the road clearing priorities. I know that people were working really hard, and it was very difficult, and we had unusual weather. But the people in the South Hills, and I just want to mention this, I don't know if it'll do any good, but who live on hills were really trapped. And they were asking me, why are we priority 3? And people who needed to get out for medication or for food or anything and couldn't get out at all. And the main roads are easier to clear, and the hills are more difficult, but there should be a way to get to. And I would like to know how we set the priorities at some point discuss whether we could change the priorities. And I know that it's something we haven't thought a lot about because we don't get a lot of snow. I remember a time when I was living in a dorm here and it snowed and everybody went outside to play in it because it was so exciting. But this time it wasn't that exciting.
My kids.
Then people have been asking me, someone has told people that the council could do something about the building that's planned for 32nd and Hilliard, which I won't give my total opinion here about it, but people are very concerned about the height and about the number of units. And someone has told them that the council could do something about it. I don't think that's true. We can't do anything about that, can we?
No, but what I can do is I'll ask our staff to send to the whole council the clarification of that, but.
As I understand it, there's nothing we can do.
Right, it goes through the regular planning process to the planning commission, and then it can be appealed, which I think it has, and then it goes through the regular appeal process, so it actually doesn't come back to the council at all.
If I can express my opinion, though, it would be good if we already had inclusionary zoning, and this building would contain a certain percentage of very small apartments, which would be good for integrating different incomes, and also would be good. Good for lots of things. But I'm running out of time, I guess. Then I'll need another round if that's possible.
I don't think we're going to have time for another round, but we can do more announcements on Wednesday if we need to.
I want to say something about the banner over the street, but.
Okay, well, can that hold?
Telling people, well, I suppose so.
Yes, thank you. It's almost 7. We have 2 more people in the queue and one other item to do. Chris.
Okay, yeah, I had 6 items, but I'll run through them quickly. Housing Policy Board and the task forces are meeting to talk about the implications of housing and other elements. And visited the Envision Eugene session that was held at Churchill High School. I'm glad to see those sessions taking place. The attendance at mine was not super high, but I think a lot of these issues have been talked through and they didn't feel the need to be there. Attended the downtown safety meeting that was held at the library. I believe Emily and also the mayor were there, and I thought that was a very good meeting and a great start to that conversation. I went canvassing with the mayor a couple of weeks ago in Ward 8, and it was a very productive, very informative opportunity to talk face-to-face with some constituents in our area. I attended the Cascades West Economic Development District meeting, which continued the conversation about earthquake preparedness and resiliency in the face of a Cascadia event. And I think we really need to start talking seriously about what our options are and what we need to do in the event of that one, euphemistically the big one. And finally, I wanted to mention that I attended both Chamber of Commerce dinners, the Springfield one and the Eugene one, both of which were really good events, well attended. And just to acknowledge once more the Eugene First Citizen, which was our city manager, John Reese.
That's right. Congratulations. And I have George Polling.
Last Tuesday, it was actually the first official meeting of the Lane Transit District Strategic Planning Committee, which used to be called the EMX Steering Committee. Before that was the BRT Steering Committee. We were just chartered by the LTD board, and basically I'll go through this to provide LTD Board of Directors with advice focused on strategic issues, independent advice on strategic planning issues related to advancing the goals of long-range transit plan, and also to involve the public as needed to develop committee recommendations along with other points. But that's just started up last week. And then Friday I had an MWMC meeting. The good news is DEQ did its inspection in December and found compliance in all categories that they inspected, which is, feather in a cap to our public works and as well as the Springfield employees involved in that. Unfortunately, with the storms, we had I think I got this right, 30% damage to the mature trees at the poplar farms. And it's an ongoing effort to do the evaluation on how they're going to deal with it, whether it's trim it or cut it out or whatever it is. So, that was a major hit on the poplar farms. And then the rest of the meeting was pretty much about either the CIP primarily. There's quite a bit of money going to be invested here in some of the projects. And a lot of it is because we're looking at equipment that's 25, 30 years old, and it's just wearing out. They've been kind of putting it back together with bubble gum and duct tape. So there's going to be some major renovations, rehabilitations, and then also they're adding another digester and upgrading some of the ones that they've already got. So busy times at MWMC.
Great. Thank you. Alan?
Yeah, I just wanted my compliments to both the eWeb staff, crews, and the Public Works staff. I think they did an amazing job of cleaning up after the storm that was the worst in 50 years. I had my second briefing on the Cascadia Rising intergovernmental exercise about cooperation after a big earthquake and how we would deal with that. And after my second one, it reinforced just how unprepared we really are in doing this. I think the folks that are in the preparedness are and getting that stuff down, they're understanding that. But I think on an individual basis and on some organizational levels, we're very unprepared. The thing that Cascadia Rising brought forth is the need for transportation to get cleared, to get the supplies in here. The actual supply airport is going to be Redmond, not Eugene or Portland, because they're figure they'll be out of commission and they'll be coming across the Cascades. So having those transportation routes and the access to the city through that is going to be very important. Just our little ice storm, even though it was a pretty big deal, compared to that big earthquake, could be relatively minor. And just another pointed to me that, and I don't have this done yet, and my wife and I were just talking about this weekend, that we need to be planning for 1 to 2 weeks of being on our own with nobody coming to give us food, water, electricity, because in some instances the transportation system and the utilities like sewer, water, and electricity might be out for a month or 3 months. So being prepared, I think, is something that we just definitely need to be working on.
Right, I agree. And now I'm prepared to move very quickly to the consent calendar so that we will not have to take up time in the next meeting if you're willing. So can I have a motion to...
Move to approve the items on the consent calendar.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All 8 in favor. Thank you very much. And we'll see you in 25 minutes.
We'll be right back in.